Welcome to DAX Machina. Join us as we explore the mysteries of this world. Cryptids, monsters, macabre tales, and horror stories abound. Could they be true? Are monsters real?
Good evening, folks, and thank you guys for joining us for another edition of DAX Machina. We appreciate you folks being with us this beautiful evening. Joining me tonight in the studio is Robbie Rip Rains and Steve Wildman Monrotis. Doc is in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan tonight and won't be with us. And we have a very special guest in the house tonight. Randy Harrington is here with us. He's part of the Ozark Mountain Sasquatch Project. He's a Bigfoot researcher on his own right. He's been into this phenomenon for a very long time, and I'm happy to say he's a friend of mine. I got to hang out with him at the Ozark Mountain Bigfoot conference just a few weeks ago and listen to him speak, and he's got a lot of great stuff I'm literally looking forward to hearing tonight, and I think you folks are going to like him too. One thing you'll notice is in the description of the show, you'll find a link to his channel. If you guys wouldn't mind doing so, we'd love for you guys to show him a little love. Make sure to go over there and give him a like, share, and subscribe. And Randy, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your research and what brought you to us.
Well, I live outside of Kansas City. In 2003, I was very much into all of the Bigfoot literature. I'd exhausted every book that I had in my local library. I started reading Roger Patterson's book when I was actually 13 in my own school library. So that was the very beginning. But when I became a man and got on a fire department, that was the first time I ever had internet access and a home computer. So once I had a home computer, well, you know how that goes. The floodgates are open. You can find anything you want and in all kinds of places. So I really exhausted all of my time looking up the Bigfoot subject because I was so interested in it based on the Roger Patterson book. So in 2003, a couple of firefighters and myself bought some four-wheelers, went down to the Kiamichi Mountains of Oklahoma, and they left it up to me to find a place that we could go to. And so me already knowing where the Bigfoot hotspot was, LaFleur County, Oklahoma, I found us a cabin that we could rent down there, and we paid a guy to take us on a 60-mile loop through the mountains down there. And that was truly the beginning. I had a discussion with that guy that was taking us around about Bigfoot. I spent all of my time off the four-wheeler looking through the woods, so much so that the two firefighters that I was with never went out with me again because they wanted to ride four-wheelers and I did not. So that was the beginning, and it's all been, I don't know, uphill or downhill ever since. I've had a lot of crazy, interesting things. I've tried to catalog everything and pay attention to everything. So that's why it seems like I have a lot of information, but I'm still fascinated with it. Just incredible. If I wouldn't have had the encounter that I had in 2006, where I saw the two up close, would I be where I'm at now? Probably not. So only 3 years into looking, I had that incredible encounter where I saw the two up close and watched them for a short while at my campsite and just flipped my world upside down. So that was the beginning. And from that point on, it was take notes, go out and just take notes until you get patterns and things figured out, and you can try to use that against them.
Yeah, well, the smell of burning rubber you had there was a shift in your paradigm, I can imagine.
Exactly. So tell us a little bit about the sighting you had in 2006.
Well, I've told the story many times, so I hope I don't bore anybody who's heard the story, because even I sometimes get tired of hearing the same story over and over again. But it was actually a culmination of multiple things that allowed me to have the encounter that I had. It was Campsite 30 at the Chickasaw National Park, south of Sulphur, Oklahoma. Now, I did not learn all the details of what was going on at that park until after my encounter. But before my encounter, there was a gentleman named Charles Hallmark who had been doing studies of his own in that park system, because he himself had a sighting, and he lived in Sulphur. And he was a homeopathic doctor, but we still call him Dr. Hallmark. And he was actually doing baitings in the trash cans there. At the time, they were trash cans that metal trash cans that you just pop the lid off of. They used cinder blocks with a chain to keep them weighted down. And so that was the kind of trash cans that are in this park system. And there's 150 campsites all spread apart in the woods along Rock Creek that goes into Arbuckle Lake. And so it's very woodsy with gravel pathways between all of the campsites. And I wasn't there because of the things that had happened to Charles Hallmark, even though the things that he had set up prior to my visit there certainly influenced the encounter that I had, because of all of the baitings that he had done in those trash cans in the off season when nobody is there camping. So I had a friend from a town away from there who said, I go to campsite 30 all the time. My wife and I have seen him. And he himself was a researcher. So I go to there one night in February. It was in the off season. There was no camp host, nothing. And I go to campsite 30, and get my stuff set up. And at that time, there were reports that were reported in the newspaper to the sheriff's department. So if you wanted to find any Bigfoot happenings in that park system, just go to the local paper, because the day before, whatever calls went into the sheriff's department would end up in the paper. And so you could get all kinds of information where a lady got knocked over by something covered in hair while she came out of the restroom. Somebody reported seeing something hairy running out of their camp when they came back to their campsite 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. So you get all of these incidental reports that are written in the local newspaper. So that's what I was basing what I was going to do there. I said, well, if somebody came back to their campsite at 11 o'clock at night and one came running out of their campsite, I'm going to assume that it knew the campsite was empty or thought the campsite was empty. Well, the campsite was empty because the people were gone. So I'm going to create a campsite and make it look like it's empty. So when I get there, there's no camp host. It's kind of chilly because it was February. And I go and I find campsite 30, and I see that I am the only one there. Out of 150 campsites, there's nobody there. So I set up a table, set up a tent, and then I go into town and get me something to eat. And when I come back, here's where my system worked really well. I had a parabolic microphone that I put on the top of my truck, and I ran the cord down through the door so that I had a headset on and I could listen to anything that was going on. I mean, 300 yards away, you could hear anything. So that was my listening system where I'm sitting in the truck, but I also taped up my windows with blankets. And my thought processes were, I need them to guarantee that they think my campsite is empty. That means they can't be looking into my vehicle from in the woods and see me moving around inside the cab. So I taped up blankets where I could open them up in front of the steering wheel, and right at the corner, I could open them up, but I was keeping them closed. So if something looking at my truck, it would just look like just a lone truck in a campsite. And no, I never opened the door. I never got out. I had a jar to pee in. My plan was I was going to stay in that truck all night long, come hell or high water. If they're there, I want to make sure that I want them to come into my campsite, think that the campsite is empty. Well, about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, I'm kicked back in my driver's seat and I'm listening with my headsets. And, you hear the nighttime sounds. Nighttime sounds are, you can almost go to sleep to the cadence of the nighttime sounds. You can hear the wind going through the trees, the rustle of the leaves, the trickling of the water. And then all of a sudden, you hear something that's out of place and you perk right up because you're like, that is not part of this musical ensemble that I'm listening to. So, and that's what happened. It was about 10:30 or so. I hear footsteps walking, crunching through the leaves. And I mean, I had already been there for a few hours. It was after dark and I'd been sitting there for a long time. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm hearing some footsteps. Now here's the interesting part. When it left the leaves, I would hear what to me sounded like a stick being dragged through gravel. So it would walk through the leaves and I would hear the crunch, 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 crunch. But every time it would go through one of these gravel pathways that go to the bathrooms and separate each campsite, I would hear a stick dragging through the gravel. And then when it would go back into the leaves, I wouldn't hear that gravel drag anymore, just footsteps in the leaves. And then I hear the first trash can lid being taken off and put back on. And I can hear that cinder block being put back on the trash can lid. I didn't know about Hallmark's baiting techniques that he was using in the off season in those same trash cans. So something was in there checking those trash cans for his old baiting system. So I'm hearing it going through the park. And then another significant thing that I hear is I hear the stick that he was dragging hits the first metal post, and I hear it go ding. And then I hear dragging, and then another 20 seconds later, I hear another ding. And it didn't take me long to realize that it was tapping the metal lantern posts that was in each campsite. So it was that 30-second pause between each of the dings tells me that it was moving just through the park. And whenever it would see like a lantern post, it would ding it. And at least that's what it sounded like in my head. So another 20 minutes or so, I'm hearing this thing going from trash can to trash can, looking in the trash cans, putting them back together. And then I hear it stop moving. All of this time, I had heard it constantly moving through the park, checking things out. And the moment I heard it stop, and I'm listening, and I hear it move a little bit and stop again, I thought to myself, it sees me. It sees my campsite. It sees that I'm here. And I was really starting to get excited at that point, because what I was hearing, and you being a policeman, you know how important it is to pay attention to details. Sometimes hearing is all you've got. You've got to try to make the best picture of what you're hearing. So I thought, he sees my campsite. That's why he's all of a sudden stopped, and I hear him moving. I thought, and I feel like he's moving from tree to tree. That's the way it sounded like, because he'd move and then stop, and then move a little bit more and stop. So I'm thinking he's going from tree to tree. So I start opening up my blankets and peeking. I just barely opened them because I didn't want to make a big thing. I still wanted it to make it look like my vehicle was empty. So I just kind of parted, and I'm peeking out, and I was looking in my side mirror behind my truck. I could see I had a diesel crew cab Ford F-250. So it was pretty big truck, big side mirrors. So I was looking in the side mirror, and there was a cluster of trees behind my truck. And that's where I saw a shadowy movement in behind the trees. And then I seen it put its hands on the side of the tree, look around the tree, and move back behind the tree. And that's the moment I saw that it looked human. To me, I could say that's a human. Because, of course, it was dark. It was a full moon, or at least it was almost a full moon. It was very, very bright. But back where he was at, it was within the tree foliage, and he stepped around a tree and then ducked back behind there. So it was still dark, but I could still see that it was a round head on top of shoulders with two hands like that, and then ducked back. So that's the moment I knew exactly where he was. And so I could focus on that spot. And man, my heart was really starting to race at that point. And so what happened next was he hit the tree with a stick. And this was the first time in all of the things that he was tapping with that stick that he hit a tree. And when he hit that tree, just behind where he was at, there was one other campsite, and then it dropped down into Rock Creek. I heard something crossing Rock Creek. So he was joined by a second one because of him hitting the tree. At least that's how I saw it. So he hit the tree. The other one came across. Now, I don't know which is the one that came around the tree the first. I'm only assuming after umpteen times telling the story that it was the little one, because it just makes sense the way it was going through the park, very nonchalant, didn't care. It was dragging the stick. It was making noises that probably a more disciplined Bigfoot shouldn't do. So I eventually see one that's about 5.5 foot tall, and a huge one. So I'm assuming it was the little one going through the park. Mm-hmm. And somebody told me, well, it might have been tapping on those metal posts as it was going through the park, so that the big one would know where he was in the park, because the big one, when he hit the tree, he was right on the other side of the creek. So he didn't have to come from a different location. So that means he kind of followed it all along the backside of that creek, because he was right there when he hit the tree and crossed it right there. So some of these things that people bring to my attention seem to make sense also, that he was tapping on the metal post so that the big one across the creek could know where he was in the park. Anyways, so at that point, there's two of them. And I'm going to tell you, I would have never believed that these things mimic owls. And I've got a recording. I should have sent this to DA so that he'd have all this that he could listen to. But something started hooting like an owl, and I had not heard any owls before that, nor after this event. So all of a sudden I'm hearing, whoo, and it even has the warble at the end. And it was every 7 seconds, and you could time it. Every 7 seconds, it did it 17 times, and it got louder each time. And then the moment it finally stopped, they both come out of the woods, and they both were hustling to get to the back corner of my truck. That's when I had a full view of both of them. I saw the big one. He was leaned over with his arms swinging as he came to, and the little one was actually bumping into his hip to stay with him, and they moved to the back corner of my truck. When they got to the back corner of my truck, the big one was in full view of me looking in my side mirror at him. He was right there. So I saw his whole body standing there, and the little one moved in behind the tailgate. The big one, the ladder racks came to here on him. He grabbed the side post. I saw a thumb when he grabbed the side post, and then the back bar across my ladder racks. He grabbed it with the other hand and was looking over the ladder racks into my campsite. They positioned the truck between themselves and my tent. So the tent was at an angle of where my truck was parked. So he immediately moved into a position that put the truck between him and the tent. And that's where he stayed. So I was able to see him. I saw his lat muscle go from under his arm all the way down to his hip bone. I mean, his lat was incredibly long and sweeping, which tells me gargantuan back strength and pulling power and braking power. So, and the fact that he came to here on my ladder racks, I was able to measure the ladder racks the next day. And from the ground to the top of my ladder racks was 7 foot. So he was a full neck and head taller than 7 foot. And I'm saying his neck and head
is 8 feet range.
Well, his neck and head is twice the size of your and my neck and head. So when you're using our neck and head as a gauge, think his head was much bigger. So I would say he might have even been closer to 9 foot.
Dang.
Just massive. His shoulders looked like bowling balls. I saw the moonlight coming through the hair on his shoulder. You could see that it was feathered outward. You know how it flows downhill, the hair, but it was kind of lifted up, and I could see light coming through the hair on his shoulder. So I took in all of these details until the moment it looked like he was about to break from that corner and come down the driver's side of the truck. And I went into pure panic mode because I thought he was coming down in the cab where I was at. And you're going to be like, man, you are so stupid, because one of the biggest fears at that moment was that my doors weren't locked, and it's a four-door truck. The doors weren't locked. I wasn't going to hit that button that goes chink and locks all the doors, because I didn't want him to know I was in the truck. I was trying to be quiet and be still. My heart was beating. I pulled my back off the seat of the truck because my heart was beating so hard. I was afraid him touching the truck would actually feel my heartbeat. So all of these things were going through my head at the same time. How can I get in a position I don't want him to know? The idea of him being on the other side of that glass with his face that close to me kind of sent me reeling. I mean, there's no way. I was rolled up behind the A post. At that point, I was behind my A post and just kind of silently praying, like, God, please just let me get through this, and everything will be okay. But I still had my plan. My plan was, I had a video camera right beside me, but I also had a handgun. And I thought to myself, if I was to step out, well, I'm going to need a flashlight in one hand. I'm going to need the gun in the other. Who's going to hold the camera? And then the other scenario would be, well, I'm going to need the camera in one hand and the flashlight in the other, but who's going to hold the gun? So I couldn't convince myself there was any shape that you could have paid me $1 million to open that door with that big one in that close proximity, even though I was set up to capture it. And that's why I was there. But I did have a plan. My plan was that if any Bigfoot showed up, because of all the stories that I'd heard from my friend who sent me to that specific campsite, I said, if one shows up, I said, I'm just going to film it through my windshield. So, I made sure that my headlights turn on without the key being turned on, the headlights turn on. And I said, so I'm just going to wait out. No matter what happens, I'm going to wait it out. And surely they're going to end up in the front of my truck at some point, and I can just have the camera rolling, pull my headlights, and be filming them through the windshield. And, maybe they'll block the light or take off running, but I'll still catch them. They never did come up to the front of the truck. So I'm there waiting for that specific moment, and it never happens. They eventually left from the same way that they came, towards the rear. But he also, you're gonna find this funny, but there's also a moment where when I thought he was coming down the driver's side of the truck, and I rolled in behind my A post, made sure that the blankets were closed, and rolled in behind my A post, all of a sudden my truck squatted. I mean, squatted heavy. He was on my bumper. He had climbed up on my bumper. And I mean, this was like a brand new F-250 diesel truck. I mean, it was heavy duty, and that thing bottomed out when he was on my bumper. And that was still some additional panic for me, because I'm thinking to myself, I thought he was in the bed of my truck. Even though I had ladder racks and stuff, for some reason I was like, he's in the bed of my truck. And I thought, if he climbs on the cab of my truck, it is going to cave in. And I had no reason to believe that he wouldn't climb on the cab of the truck, because he's in the bed of the truck. He wasn't in the bed of the truck, but I didn't know that. My thoughts were still telling me he was. So I actually grabbed my key, and I was thinking, if I hear one crinkle on that cab where he's working his way on that cab, I said, I'm going to start my truck up. And all this time I'm thinking he's in the bed of my truck, but he wasn't. Because what happened immediately with all of these thoughts in my head and my hand on the key, I hear stuff being rummaged around in the back of my truck. So to bring me down a notch, I knew that he wasn't in the bed, because I heard stuff being moved around in the bed. I had Tupperware containers with camping supplies. I had a generator. The generator was turned over on its side, and I imagine he probably just flicked it over sideways with his fingers. But the stuff was rummaged through in the back of my truck, and I had 2 little green propane tanks in the back corner. I could hear him moving stuff around like he's just checking stuff out. And then all of a sudden I hear these 2 green tanks go clank, and all movement stopped. And then I heard clank, 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 like something was toying with the 2 tanks. Needless to say, make a long story short, I sat there even after they left, and I heard metal being hit again that I thought was the stick hitting the lantern post again, because to me it sounded the same. But apparently they took the 2 green tanks. The 2 tanks were gone. So what I was hearing, the second round of metal being hit, was probably that little one carrying those 2 green tanks and clanking them together, because I heard that as they left. And I was thinking it was metal, the stick hitting the lantern post again. But when I looked at the evidence the next day, I sat there till daylight. I mean, I kept thinking, I still want them to come back. I want them to get in the front of the truck where I can hit my headlights. I'm still not going to give up the fact that I'm in my truck, and I don't want them to know it. And I didn't know how far away they would go, if they'd go away and just watch my campsite or whatever. So I never wanted to give up the fact that I was still in there hiding. So I stayed in there till daylight started coming through the trees. And then that's really the only time I felt safe enough to get out. When I got out, I immediately went to the back of my truck. I was looking for fingerprints on my ladder racks. I was looking for hairs. And when I looked on the bumper, I saw 2 dirty smudge marks on the extreme outsides of the bumper. And that tells me that's where he was standing, where his feet were on the very outsides of the bumper. That means he was leaned over my ladder racks and was rummaging through my truck. Because how big he was, that means if he was standing on my bumper, that means his waist would have been at the top of that ladder rack. So he probably was just leaned over rummaging through stuff. That's just what it tells me. But just incredible to see the things that I saw, to go through the emotion that I did, of the complete fear. That's why when somebody tells me their story, and I'm telling you, I can tell you from experience that if you're not careful, fear will do something to your body that will make you remember things a little differently, that will make you maybe fill the gaps in with something that really didn't happen. I said, your body is a crazy thing, and it does things physiologically when faced with trauma or intense fear and things like that. So don't take that lightly. But for my benefit, as fearful as I was, and sure, I guess I was traumatized, probably, but at least like you, Robbie, and you too, Steve, and you too, DA, we have so much extensive training in the jobs that we've chosen that takes you through trauma and high stress, and you get it enough that you can learn to calm yourself down, and you learn to follow the protocols and the SOGs and the SOPs, and almost like a robot, you go through these things and you learn to not let your emotions take over and dull your senses and make you make bad decisions. So because of our training, I feel like I had an advantage that night. I was able to take in all of the details because I knew it was important. I wanted to remember everything correctly. And that's where we're at. I mean, I got bit by the bug hard after that.
I believe that's what Doc would refer to as a brown pants moment.
Yep. I believe it would have been a couple times in that story that me and Doc would have been like,
look at the time.
I would have,
but
if I'd have started up that truck, if he was really in the bed of my truck, can you imagine me tearing out of that park with a Bigfoot in the back of my truck?
Hanging on for dear life.
Well,
amazing.
The thing is, that park's a one way. It's a one way. You can only come in one way, and it's one way, and it's very windy and very narrow with lots of trees. You can't go very fast through that park system.
Right.
So he'd just hop out so easy, it'd be no big deal. So starting it up was only to save my life. It wouldn't be to try to run into town with him hanging in the back of my truck.
So how big was the little one?
The little one was my size. The little one, I would say, is every bit of 5.5 feet. You know, of course, he was stooped over just like Dad when they came up to the back corner and when he moved in behind the tailgate. But clearly, he was my size. You know, and back then, I mean, I was bench pressing over 500 pounds. He looked like me. I can't imagine a baby Bigfoot that looked as thick as I did back then. It was crazy.
But the sheer muscle capacity of these things has got to be phenomenal. I mean, look how much stronger a chimp is on average than a human. And these things are just massively built. Their strength compared to ours has got to be astronomical. The fact that you kept your composure as well as you did is a testament, man. People like to say all the time, well, I would have done this or I would have done that. It is not possible to second guess how someone reacts to a situation like that unless you've been in it. And my hat's off to you, dude. You kept your cool probably better than I would have.
Well, I had a dream.
That's for sure.
I still had a dream, even with all that going on. I dreamed that they'd end up at the front of my truck at some point, and I get that video that I thought I could get there. Just didn't happen. Why did they leave? Why did they leave the way they came? I just needed them to leave that in front of my truck.
Two Shadow says, I'm short. I'd probably try to end up under the dash. I might have wound up in the floorboard myself.
You know, I had stuff in my truck. So, I mean, I had containers and camping stuff still in the back seat, and even in the passenger seat, I think I had an ice chest. So I couldn't jump to another window and look out. I really couldn't move out of the driver's seat because I did not want the cab to shake. I didn't want the cab to move in any way,
right,
for them to know that I was in there. For me, I had to stay hidden.
Mark Beasel wants to know, Randy, did you happen to have a tailgate camera on your truck, or was that before those came out?
Yeah, that was in 2006. So yeah, I don't even know if those were available then.
So if you had the same situation again, setting up in camp, how would you set your camera traps up differently?
Well, I've used my thermal camera in a way a lot of times sticking out of the top of my tent, and still haven't had much success with it. But I understand now that you can see through black trash bag plastic with the camera. So I would build a little square capsule on top and run my thermal camera up through it so that nothing can see the camera in behind that plastic spinning around. Because I think it's the spinning around that they see and still steer clear, because I'm always spinning it around when I've got it sticking out of my tent. I'm in there looking around. So I unfortunately that kind of ruins things, because I mean, I'm telling you, they are so attentive to anything that's going. I mean, you need to be not only completely silent, you can hardly move. If you want an encounter to last, man, they must have to feel that you're either not there or you are completely zonked out, and they don't have to worry. But they seem to be extremely worried. And that's why I think they did those owl calls 17 times in a row, because if they would have heard somebody getting up in the tent and putting the zipping their boots up and their pants and turning the flashlight on, like, what the hell is that noise? Then they'd know somebody's there and they can move on. So you never even know that they were around. They do whatever they can to test a campsite, I believe. At least that's what it seemed like to me. And maybe if they heard a noise or something, maybe the next thing they would do maybe is throw a couple rocks. I don't know. I just know only how it happened that night, which nothing moved in the tent because the tent was empty. So if their only attention was at the tent, they got tricked because they didn't know I was in the cab, and I wasn't about to reveal to them that I was in the cab either.
I wonder what would happen if you'd have put a looped recording in there of somebody deep asleep. Like light snoring.
I'm sure they know. Yeah, I'm sure they know what a snorer sounds like.
It might have drawn them in a little closer, at least piqued their curiosity. Dude, I got to say that's one of the more gutsy first encounter stories I've ever heard. My hat's off to you, man. You really set that one up. I would have had that same exact feeling, like, did I lock the car doors? Holy crap. But then again, having, what is that, a 1/4 inch glass between you and it? Yeah, that would be
what's weird is moment. What's weird is at the time, me and that same friend had captured one on video that we call the Ridgewalker video a year before that. Well, actually, it was only the fall before that, so it was only several months before that in the Kiamichis, and we had MK Davis take a clip of it, and the figure that was walking through the trees was reddish brown from head to toe. So we're confident that we caught one. So we had that happen, which I didn't see it because we had the camera running all day long watching this ridge right behind our campsite, and we just caught 11 seconds right at dark as it came across this ridge to look down into our campsite. So that wasn't a real encounter. That was just one we caught on video. So I can't say that that was really my first encounter, because you have a lot of where you hear things and you kind of know it's them, but that was the first where there was only 10 feet of space between me and looking at it, and he was incredible. He was an incredible specimen, and I've got a game cam picture of him on about 100 yards from that campsite. Got it a different time up on the hillside there. And I'll be happy to show it to you. He's looking through. He's looking through some openings in the trees. He's up there, and he's turned just a little bit as he's looking down, and you can see a conical shaped head and big shoulders, and you can actually see the chest. You can actually see the gray skin on the chest where the hair is thinner on the chest, so you can see the split in the chest. And I believe that's the big male, because there wouldn't be more than one big male running the same park. So I believe that was and in the picture he's reddish. So that's what my friend told me. He said it's a big red male, and then there's a little one. And so I'm sure the little one was the one I saw also. For my friend to tell me there's a big one and a little one. And he's got stories about the little one who he said had an affinity towards his wife. My friend's wife had red hair, and she was loud. She was a loud woman. So when she's in the campsite, she's probably the only one you'd hear talking. He said, for some reason, that little one he always comes around when my wife is there. And, I think he likes my wife. And I said, well, why do you say that? He said, because one time she got in the car to go into town, and I heard the little one running through the brush, and it jumped across the road. And the roads there are not very wide. Like I said, it's a single car road weaving through the trees. And he said, but he did say something specific that I've never heard anybody say. He said, when it jumped across the road, he said he had its knees pulled all the way up to its chest and cleared the road. So if that's ever proven, if somebody ever gets a picture or a video and a little one jumps that way where its knees are both pulled up all the way to its chin as it's jumping across the road, then I'll be like, okay, he's telling me the truth, because I'm still testing him. I still need to know if he's telling me the truth.
Yeah. Mrs. Moon said, did they smell?
Well, I was in the truck with the windows up. I didn't smell anything. And that means they didn't smell me either. Yeah.
That's probably
he's busy thinking of the fact that there's like 1/8 of an inch of tempered glass keeping him safe.
Yeah.
Do you think they were aware you were in the truck?
I don't think so. That's why I did everything to not move the metal and get my, and I'm telling you, when I looked down and I saw my shirt going boom, 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 and that's when I thought, oh my God, he's touching my ladder racks. He can feel my chest pulsating through the metal of my truck. And that's why I pulled my back off the seat, because I was like, I don't want him to even feel my metal, the metal of my truck from my heartbeat. I said, I can't let him know I'm in here.
Dude, that is a very intense encounter.
Randy, Mike A wants to know how much you estimated the big one to weigh.
Well, after that, I had two 350-pound guys get on my bumper so I could gauge how far it would drop, and it barely dropped. It barely dropped with 600 pounds of fat dudes on there. So I guessed him at about 1,000. I mean, he had to be 1,000 pounds,
maybe even more.
He was huge.
Look at the equations that they use for muscle density when staging up the size of something. Like if they were to stage up the size of a mountain gorilla, there's certain mathematical formula that they can use to estimate how much the bone density would be. Something that big, you can't measure it on a human scale. Its muscle would be thicker, its bone would be thicker. It might even weigh as much as 2,000 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is he was way heavier than the two fat dudes.
Well, I mean, you can look at a horse and think, I mean, and extrapolate that, because you get a 1,200-pound quarter horse. It doesn't look like it's 1,200 pounds, but because horses have that thick muscle density, and Lene's in the chat, she can attest to that.
Tonight's Miss Lene's anniversary. She's out with her husband.
Leave it to that. I talk about horses and Miss Lene's not in here, but that's you can kind of figure out that same kind of equation and look at, a horse that looks like it probably weighs 1,000 pounds weighs maybe 1,500 pounds because of how thick the bones and the muscle are. So I mean, it's kind of the same way with most animals, I would assume. Because there's not a lot of fat animals in the animal kingdom.
No. Lurks a lot wanted to know, did you ever try that same experiment again?
Well, Lurks a lot, I tried everything in so many different versions. I went back there. Fire department schedule allowed me every 2 weeks, I'd have a 4-day stretch off. So for like a year, I was going down there every 2 weeks, trying to make it happen again. I actually caught some pictures from 4 months after that I believe is the juvenile coming into my campsite. I got 2 pictures of him where I hid the camera on a table. That's why I was going to have a discussion with you about, I don't think they do see IR. As a matter of fact, they can be tricked. So I think it's something else. But anyways, so I got 2 pictures there of I believe to be the juvenile. But I've built boxes with camo and I've tried to hide in the bed of my truck there. I've tried to hide in different places and set up different scenarios. I put carpet tack. I would buy carpet tack, the wood strips with the things that make carpet stick on the floor. Mm-hmm. And they're very sharp. And I painted them black and glued them to the sides of my ladder racks and the tops of my ladder racks. So if something came in there and grabbed them again, they'd leave skin and blood. I've tried everything to recreate another night like that to no avail.
Chris Hensley wants to know if there were any tracks around the truck.
No, pea gravel. Like I said, he was dragging that stick through gravel. So that's the type of ground when there's no leaves, when they're out of the leaves, it's just gravel.
And you said that there weren't any handprints on the ladder rack.
I did go to the creek to try to see if I could find any where when I heard what I thought was the big one cross, and I will look to see if I can find my picture. About 3 foot up out of the creek water. The water's only about 1 foot deep and it's about 20 feet wide, rock bottom. But I saw in the bank, a very steep bank going up, where about 3 foot up, it looks like a foot was jammed into it, and you can see the big toe as the toes get smaller, where it just stuck its toes to climb up. And I took a picture of that, and I got to find it, but I've got it somewhere. And you can see a big toe and then the progressively smaller toes in just where the toes were stuck into the side of the bank as it climbed up the hill. So that's the only foot thing that was even possibly found, because I was looking down there to where I heard something cross the creek when it joined the little one. So that's how I found that. But I have found dusty, huge handprints on the bathroom, inside of the bathroom door, that I've taken a picture of and put my hand against, and you can see that it is 1.5 times the size of my hand. On the women's side of the bathroom, I have found a hair stuck in the turnbuckle into one of the stalls up next to the ceiling, where I had to reach way up next to the ceiling to get this hair unstuck. They're going in the bathrooms there.
Might be a good place to hide a camera.
Well, you get caught with the bathroom camera. And
that's a good point. Yeah, I didn't think about that. That didn't even factor into my head.
I was like,
wait,
I did not just suggest that.
I was busy replaying that in my mind, saying, "Did you really just say that?"
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Officer, I was thinking
like focus on the door.
Well, remember, I was telling you earlier, one of the sheriff's reports was a lady getting knocked over by a hairy something running around the corner of the bathroom when she came out of the bathroom. So that's what made me start. When I'm there in the off season, there's no host, there's nobody else camping. So the place is relatively empty. And then there's the bathrooms up towards the front, and I'm always in there looking for stuff. I'm looking for fingerprints on the mirrors. I'm looking for anything. And that's where I found the dusty handprint pushing out the door on the woman's side. And then the hair was on the men's side up next to the ceiling. So I was very excited at that point. I did find, you're going to like this, I did find a woman's tampon that, was hanging by a string. It was laying out on the ground, and it was bitten, and it had the half bite mark of a person's mouth where it bit it, and half of it was gone.
Huh. Iowa Wolf says, what's your truck's payload capacity? It could give you an idea of its weight.
Mike A said that a minute ago. Said it was 1,200 pound tongue weight.
Yes, something to that effect. I'd have to look it up. I do know that at some point, both of my on both sides, my leaf springs were cracked, because I didn't know one was cracked until it turned sideways and came out and started rubbing against the tire. But I don't know if it happened that night. I just know sometime later I had some leaf issues where one was cracked and one was actually falling out on one side.
Huh.
Well,
so probably couldn't hurt.
Figures it's 3/4 ton, so that could give you a little bit of a very, very rough estimate.
So, like we were talking a little bit before the show, we kind of had a running theory on here that we thought it was possible that they could see the IR spectrum, and that's why they avoided trail cams. But you've got a different idea. I'd kind of like to hear. I know everybody that's in the chat's probably heard us talk about the trail cam idea. I want to hear your point of view on that. I want to hear what you think, man.
One of the things that I've learned being in this arena for so long is people are easily influenced, and all it takes is one person saying, well, they can see the IR, and then it kind of rolls on its own. And so everybody says that, whether they know that or not. I never fully believed that, all because when I listen to the Sierra Sounds, the CD where Ron and Al Berry talk about the sounds, the Sierra Sounds. Well, they also talk about trying to put up game cameras. Back then, the only game camera they had was regular cameras that they used with tripwires. So it had nothing to do with the technology of cameras today. And still, they got avoided. They got destroyed. They were left hanging in pieces in the tree. And they were not cameras with IR. They were not cameras at all. They were not game cameras at all. They were just cameras that they had rigged up with string traps. So I cataloged that in my head. So what is it about those cameras that got them avoided, destroyed, played with, toyed with, and they're different cameras than what we've got today? So it wasn't the IR. And like I said, I got two pictures. When I hit a game camera that had IR, I hit it on a table amongst other camping supplies facing the wood line. And I finally caught two pictures where one came up, and I think it was the little one, popped his head up over the camera, over the table edge, and you got this whole head right there in front of the camera, and you see ears on the side of the head, and it's all covered in hair, but it's so close to the camera that it's all washed out in white. So you just see a round head with hair. But it's the second picture that tells me that indeed I believe that was a Bigfoot, because the second picture shows it standing up, and it sees an armpit and a chest with hair on it, and a top of the shoulder with hair on it. And it's washed out white too, because it's right at the edge of the table. So that means it came into camp on low, on probably all fours, and then stood up, which would have put the table between it strategically, just like they did with the truck. They put the table between them and the tent. So that's how he came in and was kind of peeking up and around, and the camera caught 2 pictures of him, but it was hidden on a table. So the IR didn't do anything. The fact that it was plastic didn't do anything, because it was amongst other plastic and Tupperware containers and camping supplies. So they can be tricked. I've also got 2 pictures from the Kiamichis where what I just talked about in my last presentation, where the trajectory that we got on video, I put a camera assuming that it would use the same trajectory over and over again, which turned out to be true. So I put the camera in a position that if it was coming down that trajectory to look into my campsite, that it might miss a camera on the back side of the tree. And I caught 2 pictures, and I had the camera about 7 foot up on the tree, and I got hair at 7 foot up. I got hair, and then the second picture looks like there's a hand with a palm crease over the lens. So there's a few times I think they've been tricked, even though they're IR cameras. So for myself, and I'm just speaking for me, I've got to take that off the table, that it's not the IR. It's, it's the fact that maybe that it's just that it's plastic. Maybe these clicks and stuff that we hear, this is far-fetched, but occasionally we'll get recordings where we'll hear these clicks. Maybe they're making these clicks. Do they have some type of sonar where they can easily make these clicks and listen to where it bounces back? And so from some distance, they'll know that there's something plastic on the side of a tree, even without it being in sight, because they can have those. I don't know. That's just a guess, but clearly anything plastic is going to give off a different sound or feel with an echo, odor. I think it has very little to do with the IR, if anything at all, only because
that makes a lot of sense.
What I've been able to.
We've actually talked about getting a couple of game cameras and making new housings out of like whatever natural wood occurs in that area, and trying to mask as much of the scent and sight of something foreign as you can, because the IR thing is, it's just like all this stuff. All of it's theory and speculation. Nobody knows for sure of what it is, but that's both of those I think are sound theories, and I think it's definitely worth something looking into to make a housing that kind of resembles more of what they would find in nature.
Well, yeah. Plastic doesn't exist in nature by definition.
Right.
It's a
even covered
material.
in a camo paint, it's still plastic. I'd like to give all your listeners, anybody that's willing to try to do things that I think would be effective. And I've done this once, and I only did it for one time overnight. So I didn't have a long enough time frame for this to show its effectiveness, but I think it has validity. That is, go to a steep banked creek and take a shovel and just dig a hole in the side of the bank and sink a camera back into that hole, so that something coming down the creek would have to actually break that hole and get a picture taken, and they'd never see the side of the camera because it would be sunk into a hole in the side of the creek bank. So maybe attempt to do that. And even in the mountainous areas or the deep hollers or the high ridges, you can take a steep side and stack rocks, take rocks off the ground that are part of that fauna and natural area, and just kind of stack some rocks and put the camera within that rocks, so that it just kind of looks like a pile of rocks on the side of a hill with the camera, so those are at least, I think, some ways that if we want to try to experiment, with how we can get a camera hidden, that those might be some good ways.
Well, if you think about some of the cameras that they've got now for like home security, they've got cameras that look like rocks. There's technology where you could actually take an actual rock and drill it out, hollow it out enough to put a smaller camera in it that might just do something. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities that, we could, kind of venture in and test the waters on and see, because it may be a combination of both. Maybe maybe they can see in some of the spectrums, but maybe it's like you said too, a lot of it's the smell and like DA said earlier, I can't remember if we was on the air when you said that somebody hangs something up in your living room, you're going to know it. Well, this is their living room. They know everything. So if you've got something that is naturally there, it stands to reason that they may not notice it.
Well, I do have an experience where before I started putting our parabolic and recorders in real logs, so now they look really natural when they're laying on the forest floor. I had little black boxes that I would have all of this same equipment in a little black toolbox. And there was a certain trail at the 400 that we thought they were coming down on the backside of this creek because of some activity we had the night before. And so we went about 60 feet up on this trail, and I put this recorder parabolic mic set up, and I stacked rocks on top of this little black box, stacked the rocks up. And I'm telling you, even this little pile of rocks was something that they noticed was not there the day before, was something. If that's their travel area, they know immediately when something's different. So I do have a recording where about 10:30, 11 o'clock that night, something walks right up and you hear it coming and starts to disassemble these rocks and then starts tapping on the box after disassembling the rocks that I had hit it in. So I'm telling you, just the fact that there's a pile of rocks that wasn't there the day before when they ran that trail or came down that side of the creek, that's how attentive to details they are. Man, putting up a camera, there's no way you're going to be able to hide one good enough. Unless like Robbie said, we figure out a way to get it in a rock or get it in a log or get it in a position where it's just so completely natural that it slips by them. But even then, there's half the time where they're probably watching you assemble these things. So you're going to have to do it in a way where you just kind of drop it in place and not spend a whole lot of time there, because they might be paying attention to that too.
I really liked your approach of putting it amongst other items that aren't natural to the area on the table. I think that's pretty smart. I'm not surprised you got a couple of good images out of that. So
that's what I do, man. I try everything.
One of the theories we kind of bounced around amongst ourselves here on the show is that what people refer to as wood knocks, part of that might be made with their mouths.
Well, I can tell you that you may be right. I mean, certainly, how can we even possibly know unless we eventually see it? And hopefully we eventually will. I can tell you from one of my main encounter in 2006, he was clearly dragging a stick. He had a stick in his possession and was dragging it around, unless he was making the sounds with his mouth of stick being dragged through gravel and a stick hitting the lantern post, which doesn't make any sense. So clearly he had a stick in his possession. Also, I was up in Walla Walla, Washington, in the Blue Mountains where Paul Freeman had all of his area. And I was actually going to places that I could find in his book that talked about certain places. And I was up there with a naturalist from Georgia, and he was up there doing a project, a game camera project. And I recorded a bunch of knocks up on the ridge above our campsite. And the way I got these is there was a spring way above where our campsite was. So we walked up to that spring. I took a tent, opened it up, and set it by the head of the spring where the spring started. And I laid a recorder in the bed of the tent. And then we went back down to our campsite. So it was further up the ridge, but it was just a lone tent sitting up there all by itself with a recorder in it. Well, I recorded a bunch of tree knocks. And so the next day we're down there listening to them on my laptop. And I was like, man, I said, there's probably 35, 40 tree knocks from about, midnight, 1 o'clock till about 5 in the morning. And as a naturalist, he said, it's got to be something natural. There's got to be a natural explanation as to what is making those noises. And I'm like, well, why is it only happening, say, like after midnight and coming to a stop around 5? And how come we're not hearing it in the woods right down here by our woods? If it's something in the woods that's natural to the woods, why is it only happening in those woods up there on the ridge? And he's like, okay, good point. He said, but I'm not ready to admit that there's that many of these creatures, that we're hearing that many knocks. So the next night, I do some more recordings, and I get another slew of knocks going back and forth, all these knocks. One of the knocks, you can hear a stick hit the tree, and either break and fall or come out of the hand of whoever swings it, like a bat that vibrates out of your hand when you hit something, but clearly it's hitting the tree, and then you hear the stick break and clamor against whatever he was trying to hit. And I let him, the naturalist, listen to that, and he said, wow. He said, that sure changes things, because it sounded like something was swinging like a bat, and it broke as he hit the tree. So I'm going to lean towards that they are actually using sticks. Doesn't mean that they could be hitting their chest, they could be using their mouth. They really could be. I don't know. I just try to go with, wherever my evidence takes me.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I don't think there's really any one answer, though. I think they're probably doing a variety of things.
Right. Because we know they use rocks. We've actually found where there's rocks left in the fork of a tree. And we recorded a tree knock one night and went down to that corner of the creek and found a baseball-sized rock sitting on top of a log. And Shane hit it, and we recorded it and compared the two, and they were very similar. So they're using wood on wood. They're using rock on wood. So certainly they could also be used. They're so good at nonverbal communications. I would think that they could probably slap their chest or pop their mouth or whatever else. I mean, why wouldn't they?
Well, when I was a kid, I grew up on a farm, and we had a big stand of trees at the back of our field. And I used to mimic bird sounds and crap, and I'm just a farm kid, in the 70s. There wasn't a whole lot to do, wasn't any television channels. So I would mimic bird sounds and animal sounds, but I kept hearing this weird popping sound coming from the woods. And it took me quite a while to be able to make it back. And the noise filter on my mic is going to filter part of this out. It may not filter all of it out, but sometimes where you can hear it, I can do this really loud, and I guarantee you that they can do it a lot louder than I can. I'll see if the filter is going to filter it out. Let me try it.
It filters.
Did it come
out.
through?
Yeah,
It filtered it out.
Yeah, it does it every time because you do it so loud. It filters it out.
I can pop my tongue like very loud. In fact, Robbie can tell you when I did it at the Bigfoot conference in Gatlinburg. Pretty much everybody in the room turned and looked straight at me like, what the hell was that?
It quietened the room down because it sounded just like what you hear.
Well, I can appreciate what you're saying, and it does make sense. But for me, I would say there has to be a need for it. And
well,
that need,
that's where we were going with that. And we didn't.
Then let me peruse this first. I read a report, and we all know that maybe reports are true, maybe they're not. I don't know. But it was a child or a man who said when he was a child picking blueberries, and he said he was picking blueberries in this thick thicket, and he would see this other hand reaching up and picking and he eventually got close enough. Then the hand had hair on it, and it was another Bigfoot, and they kind of interacted within this berry picking session. And he said it was amazing. And he says, then all of a sudden his dog came out of the cabin and came running towards the thicket barking. And he said the Bigfoot shot out of the blueberries and ran to the wood line. And he says within 2 seconds, it snatched a branch off a tree, broke it, and spun around facing the dog and had a club in its hand that it got in a matter of 2 seconds. If that's true, then getting a stick to hit a tree to respond to somebody else hitting, and that's some of the reasons people think they do it with their mouth, because they just couldn't got a stick so fast. They just couldn't get a stick that fast. Well, if that kid's telling the truth, then they can get a stick that fast. And with the, so I'm going to have to keep leaning in that direction until, proven otherwise.
Well, like I said, I don't think there's any one explanation. I think they're capable of doing multiple different things. I don't think that by any stretch of the word that means that they're a one-trick pony. I imagine sometimes that is a wood-on-wood contact. But the kind of idea we came up with is if they are at least partially subterranean, then the tongue pop could be used for echolocation. Because we know blind people have taught themselves to navigate with just the popping of their tongue. There are lots of videos of it out.
Well, the nice thing about those tongue pops and things like that, finger snaps and whatnot, they're non-harmonic sounds. They're very pure sound, so you don't have feedback that could possibly be destructive feedback or whatever, like you would with like a vocalization, like a like a whistle or a hum or a scream or something like that. It would travel a good distance, and it'd be pretty easy to identify the source of it. If you are using echolocation there.
What do you think of that?
I'm a long way from thinking that they're subterranean at all. I don't think they use caves at all.
Really?
Well, they wouldn't need so much nonverbal communications that they use out in the open if they weren't always out in the open. I think they're too incredibly smart to put themselves in a position that they can get captured and blocked in to where there's, and I don't know, a lot of the stories are, well, all these subterraneans are connected and, multiple ways in and multiple ways out. I don't know that. I've seen spelunkers that very treacherous and hard to navigate. And so I just don't think that there's as many cavernous openings and all connected together that we would like to think there is. And I just don't think that's in their nature. And it took me a long time to get there, that I went from a scary looking animal to now I believe that they are incredibly intelligent, developing alongside of us throughout the history of man. They're just as intelligent and in their own way more intelligent, and think like us, move like snipers. We've thermaled them moving like snipers because they think you see movement. Incredibly intuitive, and I just don't think they would be dumb enough to put themselves in a hole or a cave that would allow them to get caught like that. That's why they're out in the open most of the time, and they have to use tree knocks and rock clacks and whistles and things to warn each other, let them know what's going on, because they're always out in the open, whether it's opportunistically napping up on the side of a ridge with always a sentinel on the lookout, possibly, probably. That's just at least what it's saying to me. That makes more sense than anything else. And I apologize if I seem to be the odd man out.
No, dude, that is 100% what we want. I don't want to bring people on the show that are just going to agree with everything I say. That's not how we learn. We learn through discourse. We learn through sharing ideas. And, every idea I've come up with is not right. I guarantee you that. Every idea I've come up with may not be wrong either. But how we learn and how we grow in this field is by comparing notes and comparing these theories and see which ones pan out. So, absolutely share your theories. I want to hear them.
I think one thing that helps me is, I've got OCD tendencies and I do things a certain way. But the part of the OCD that really weighs me down is I think of everything that we do and I see it through in 20 different ways. I see where it'll fail before we do it. I see where it could be successful, so that we'll try it. So the OCD really takes a hold, and when my thought process is, in how we do things. And I'm going to give you a for instance. When Shane approached that little one out in the field that I saw with my thermal, the reason we saw that is because I had remembered what happened 5 years earlier when I saw another juvenile at Bennett Springs, and the way it moved. It just had the top of its head sticking up behind a bush and was looking at me. But then when I was facing it, it was slowly dropping, and it was moving so incredibly slow that it did not look like it was moving. But in 3 minutes, it slowly looked like it was starting to disappear. And then in a full 3 minutes, it was gone. That's how slow it moved when it thought it was being looked at, faced. So that same behavior is what I caught of a little head looking up out of the deep grass across this field that we were walking through on the 400. And I saw this little heat signature, and I'm watching it, and I see it doing the same thing that look. And I said, that's one right out there, Shane. I said, that's one. And we had a biologist with us. So that started the process of Shane was like, well, okay, I'm going to walk out there. And so we started that whole process of him going out there and eventually shining a light in its face. It was one of the 5 foot juveniles, but it had a same pattern of movement that from in a different location 5 years earlier that another juvenile did. So recognizing patterns. Now, when Shane got close to it, we were a nervous wreck. We had never approached any of them. We'd always let them have the upper hand, think that they were hidden, we'd see them and we'd just kind of let them, okay, there's one over there. Let's just watch it with the thermal and pretend like we don't know he's there. We kind of give them that kind of freedom of having control. This was the first time we approached one. I was a nervous wreck because I could see its behavior as Shane was walking out towards it, and it was popping its head up and ducking back down and like it couldn't decide what to do. Does it bolt? Does it run? Does it stay there and hold its ground? And I was trying to explain to Shane what it was doing as he was approaching. And I was like, slow down. I said, slow down. It's nervous. I can tell, and so trying to walk him through and talk him through it. But that's a long story because it involved many things. He actually came back and then went back out there because it never left. But he was trying to look at the body, and he was trying to step around with his flashlight and look at the body. And the moment he did that, that put him too close to it when it was laying prone in the grass. Mm-hmm. And that's when a rock come flying out of the wood line that was maybe 50, 60 feet away and almost hit him in the leg. And Shane goes, whoa, whoa. He's like, something just threw a rock at me. And he backed up and he was like, okay, I'm out of here. And he came back to the trail. And that's when we decided, okay, man, we've already pushed this far enough. We're afraid we're going to end all the activity here by approaching one of the little ones. You just shouldn't do stuff like this. And we got to rethink what we're doing here. And so we went back to camp. Long story short, activity did not die down. And we were very grateful, very thankful. But we started talking about, and here's where my OCD comes into play. We were talking about the rock got thrown at him. The next day, we go back to that spot to investigate. And the way we investigate, I go stand in the same spot with my thermal. Thermal sees the same thing in the day as it does at night. Put Shane in the same spot. You see the body imprint of this little one where it laid in the grass. It measured about 5.5 feet, so it was one of the juveniles. Went over to the wood line where the rock came from, the direction, and found 12-inch tracks, which tells us it was the mom that was in there that threw the rock. Here's where my OCD just plays scenes over and over again, trying to get the details. The mother was at the edge of that wood line, and she never made a peep while we're walking up on a 5-foot juvenile son or daughter of hers. And she doesn't say a thing. And it was the little one in the grass that actually started clicking his teeth when Shane started to try to step over to look at the body, that showed a nervousness that had her throw a rock. So that moment she threw the rock, and I told Shane, I said, she could have shook a tree. She could have screamed at you. She was only 50 feet away. She could have screamed at you. She could have shook a tree and made all kinds of ruckus because you were getting too close to her little one. I said, she never did. I said, she's holding a little one. She's holding a baby. And he's like, why do you say that? I said, because she's more protective of that you not know where she was, even though she wanted you away from her juvenile little one out there in the grass. She's more protective of where she was located. And come to find out, a couple of years later, we start seeing some 6-inch tracks. So indeed, she was holding a little one. And that behavior, because I thought it through 100 different ways from Sunday, told me that she was holding a little one. Now, we've got a new instance of things happening at the 400, and I think I've got a pretty good idea of what's going on. We're finding these holes. Now, these holes have been found for upwards of 4 or 5 years at different times. Whenever there are tracks from this family unit of the little ones between 6 and 7 inches, 5 and 7 inches, we're finding these holes being dug. And anyways, needless to say, the sticks are always left with these holes. We've actually got a handprint next to one of the holes that of a small hand. So we've got a hand size that goes with 6-inch tracks. So the stick that are used to dig these holes, and they're not very big holes, but you see the dirt out of the hole, and the sticks are always still laying there with dirt still on the stick. So I'm thinking this through over and over and over, and I'm saying, what is happening? And then we hear a report from 1989 of a lady from Britain who was up in the Pacific Northwest and Northern California and stuff. And she has a sighting on the beach where she watches a family of them that has 2 little ones. And the male wades into the water and starts throwing seaweed up to the female. And she said the 2 little ones were digging holes. And I sent that to Shane. I said, look, here's one from 1989 where she said that while the parents were busy, the little ones were just digging holes, not because it meant anything specific. It's just they were just biding their time. And I said, That's why those sticks are always left either in the hole or right next to the hole, never taken away, never carried away. I said, because mom and dad are doing something, they're digging the holes, but when mom and dad are ready to go, they have to drop the stick right where they're at and get on over there with mom and dad, because they are a well-disciplined, these are disciplined children. And that's why to me, the sticks are always found there. The sticks aren't carried away and used for something else or thrown in the creek, because they are leaving immediately while they're digging the hole, and the stick is always left there. We won't know until we ever get a picture or a video of that happening, but that's what makes sense to me as an overthinker, as why the sticks are left like that, because they have to leave immediately. That's because mom, dad says, come on, let's go.
So what do you think the significance of the holes are?
Just like the one from 1989, they were just digging holes while mom and dad were
Just
busy.
bored?
I don't know.
Boredom.
I they got to find something. You know, I mean, I don't know. We're not finding evidence of grubs or worms. If a grub was pulled out of the dirt, you see a big cavity where the grub still was. We haven't found any of that yet. Doesn't mean that they're not digging for worms, but the fact that the sticks are left there in the manner that they are tells me that they're doing that while mom and dad are doing something that they're not to be interfering with. They've got to be finding something to take up their own time with. And then when mom and dad are done looking for fruits on the pawpaw trees or whatever, because one of the holes was found over in that area. And that means when they're done, and maybe mom slaps her thigh and it's time to move on, the little ones immediately go to where mom is so they can follow them and drop the stick where it sets. That's just what the scene is telling me is happening, but I don't know if that's true or not.
Now, I have a question. So, yeah, if you've watched our show before, I'm usually kind of the agnostic of the group. I'm the only one of the three of us regulars here who hasn't had any kind of an encounter. I want to believe, which is why I'm still here, but I haven't had that positive encounter. I was always able to kind of explain away the reason I hadn't seen one was because of potentially they're disappearing into these subterranean places or whatever. In order for us to be seeing them and for them to still be here, there's got to be a breeding population, so enough to keep the species going. Where do you think they're going that we're not seeing them more regularly? I honestly want to know, because I'm puzzled.
Well, not too far from the county that we're in, I was, of course, reading BFRO County, close to where we're at, and I saw where in the 70s, two guys were hunting, and they were walking across the field at 5:30 in the morning, and in chest deep grass, and all of a sudden a Bigfoot jumps up and goes running up the hill where it was obviously either napping or laying down, and was caught off guard way out somewhere where there's no houses and just two hunters. That's probably more indicative to what their life is. Opportunistic nappers, laying on the side of a ridge, buried up in a thicket, up under a brush pile, wherever they feel safe and can get a good nap in, or the whole family does that. I don't know. I just know that they wouldn't need so many nonverbal communications if they didn't need them. And they need them because they are out in the open and they have to warn each other without it being a scream or a vocal or a voice. Okay. That they must feel. We must not know their secret language, which is nonverbals, but we would know if it came out of their mouth and was a verbal warning and things like that.
Gotcha. They're just kind of bivouacked, away wherever they can opportunistically find a spot.
It just makes the most sense. Or there wouldn't be so many knocks when you're coming into an area or knocks when you're leaving an area. That means they're talking to another one and telling them something. So it's very interesting.
Well, I would, I keep telling the guys, I would love to have one of these encounters, but I'm playing in my head your encounter, and, I would have, been a one-man colonoscopy prep right in there waiting for, Bigfoot to get a hold of me there. I don't think my poor sensitive nature could handle being that close to one.
Well, I don't know. Be careful what you wish for. It's grabbed a hold of me in a way where I have spent way too much money, way too much time, but I enjoy it. I mean, we could very easily have other vices that are more destructive to our life than this, and it's pretty destructive if you get too caught up in it.
So in your area, the 400, what are some of the things you've observed, like food sources? What kind of food sources are they using?
Well, of course, Shane Carpenter, I mean, he's like a machine when it comes to policing an area and looking for tracks, looking for sign. I mean, I know nothing about that stuff. That's why I've worked so hard in the other areas, whether it be audio and thermal and stuff like that. But when it comes to reading the land, I mean, he is really an expert at it. And I mean, this is going to be amazing. He has shown me where there's a trackway pushing through the grass and going up this ridge, where every so often, and he'll show me, see how this is broken over? That tells me that this thing is probably right-handed, because every so often on the right-hand side, it's grabbing a hold of something and kind of twisting it and breaking that as it's taking this walk. So if they're more on the line of being a human hominid or whatever, they would certainly be 90% of them would be right-handed, just like, the way we are. And I had a gentleman reach out to me from Colorado, and he said, Randy, he said, what do you think about, he said, there's one that seems to always come in to my campsite, and it circles my tent, going this particular way every time, the same direction. I said, probably because he's right-handed. And he was like, holy shit, I never even thought about that. I said, that it probably has a tendency to want to go to the right because he's right-handed. He doesn't know why. Right-handed people don't know why they use their right hand. It's just natural. So if we start thinking about things along, he's like that. That makes perfect sense. Where that particular one moves in a way around something when it's being strategic, because it's a right-handed individual. It's beautiful. But things like that have happened. Shane has shown me those things, which made me even start to think about them being right-handed or left-handed by the things that you see that the right hand is doing as it's walking along this trail. Like we've caught the movements, the sniper movements, extremely slow. We've also got the movements that were so fast, and we caught this on thermal, that you don't even see it move. It went from full headshot to beep. I mean, in an instant, it had dropped that fast. So we've got the instant movements, and we've also got the super slow movements. I've got one belly crawling on thermal, where you can see it reaching out and moving itself to deeper cover. Just fascinating. Just fascinating. I'm not even sure, you were asking me what kind of things that we've seen at the 400. I mean, I guess
for food sources. 3D Havoc had a question. He said, "Here's my question. These things takes dumps, right? Why haven't any Bigfoot dumps been found?"
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, they leave scat. There's been scat piles found here at the 400 with pawpaw seeds in them all the time. Matter of fact, me and Shane had several discussions about, he was finding their scat with the pawpaw seeds in them well into December, a month and a half after there is not another single pawpaw left on the ground. That would only suggest that maybe they've learned how to store them somehow.
Maybe bury them?
I don't know. We just know that there's no pawpaws, and there hasn't been any for a month and a half, and they're still pooping out pawpaw seeds. You tell me what's happening.
Well, it only makes sense that they're either finding a way to store them, or they have a very slow digestive system.
I don't know. What we also have found rock bathtub looking things that when the creek level comes up and as it settles down, it looks like those might be catch basins for fish.
Well, the Native Americans used to make fish traps like that, where they would funnel the water down into an area that they'd cordoned off with rocks. That's a pretty basic fish trap, and a lot of survival manuals will teach you how to make those. So well, that's not surprising that they know how to do that.
I really hope that we find a good population of these things, because you got me hung up on the handedness thing. The percentage of handedness with them could kind of help us figure out evolutionarily how close they are to us. The reason I mentioned that is like chimps, for example. Chimps are predominantly right-handed like humans are. But gorillas and orangutans are primarily left-handed. And then you get to the lower monkeys, and they don't seem to care. They're completely ambidextrous. And everybody argues that chimps are the most similar, ape to a human. I'd be kind of curious to see, where things branched off. They've got to be related to us somehow.
Well, I can tell you this, Steve. Earlier you were talking about how many there are and things like that. That's a very hard question, but I can tell you what we've seen at the 400 when it comes to these footprints. And Shane has I mean, I've been lucky enough to kind of be along with Shane doing the things that he does, but I mean, he's been casting the same prints. When I first started coming there, I believe they were 7.5, 8.5 inches then. For the next 3 years, casting the same tracks in these mud flats year over year, and they were getting about an inch bigger every year till they were like 11 inches. And that's when you quit finding them. All of a sudden, you don't find those anymore. And here in a little short while, here comes some new 9-inch tracks and 6-inch tracks where there's 2 smaller siblings now leaving the evidence. But clearly there's 2 siblings that have aged out of the family unit. Where they go, I can't even begin to speculate. But they go somewhere. And the 400 acres that we're on, it's not a postage stamp of woods surrounded by city. It's next to 700 acres that we've got access to, and that's next to 500 acres over this other way. There's 500 acres that somebody from California owns that nobody even goes into, but they're all connected together, and there seems to be patterns where they move in and off this property. So it's even though we're on 400 acres, it's a very small parcel compared to the bigger parcels around us. So it's an enormous amount of space. So how much space do they need so that when they've got 2 young ones growing up and now ready to go on their own, how far away do they go? Do they still need parental assistance as they become subadults? And do they move close enough where they can still ask mom and dad questions if they need to? I mean, those are all just speculations. All we know is they've no longer been seen at the 400. Their tracks are gone once they hit the age of an adult. And that's true in most reports. You hardly ever see multiple adults in a family unit. So for some reason, multiple adults is a no-no for whatever reason. So that means at some point, a subadult, it's time to move on.
3D Havoc says, do you think they breed between other families at certain times?
Breed between other families? I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Breed between other families.
Like groups will get together so they don't
so
overdo the bloodline.
Genetic diversity.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, we only know about genetic diversity. Because science told us that, I suppose. Yeah,
not a whole lot of genetic diversity down in Arkansas.
Right. So I don't know. I can only imagine. Well, most wild animals, they hardly ever breed within their own family. So, I mean, I don't know if anything needs to really even be told that. So I don't know.
I had another question I was going to ask you. Oh yeah, it was one of the questions I always like to ask all the guests we have on. What is the most frightening encounter you've ever had? Whatever, whether it was a Bigfoot or whatever.
Not much compares to that first one. So everything after that has been kind of a letdown as far as how exciting they can be. Most of them are fleeting. I've learned that they are incredibly timid, even for their size. Most of the fear from that first night was in my own head. It was my own buildup of my own fear that caused me all of that anxiety in my truck. Since then, I've got such a better understanding of. I think they want to communicate with us. I think they're trying the best they know how with all of their nonverbal communication skills. Throwing rocks. I think throwing rocks is a communication. I don't think it's an aggressive thing hardly at all. I'm not saying that if they throw a bowling ball sized rock into your tent that they're not being aggressive. I'm saying that most of their rock throwing are dinks and dunks and smaller rocks. And I think they're so good at nonverbal communications that that's what they're trying to do. And I think once we start to understand that they seem to be compelled to come in. They keep coming in and putting themselves at risk. The irony doesn't make any sense that something that tries to stay hidden so well will still put themselves at risk by coming in so close to our campsites, unless there's something else involved. Like they're compelled to want to communicate with us somehow. We're just not receiving it correctly. Most of the time we're afraid and we go running out and throw stuff in our vehicles and start shooting guns in the air and shining bright lights into the, I think when we stop doing those kind of things, maybe we'll finally start to understand, that they are trying to communicate, and maybe we can get to communicate back with them. But man, it's hard to get to that point. I'm telling you, to get down there, set on your butt and expose your hands empty with one in close proximity, it takes guts.
Yeah, well, facing something that obviously terrifies you takes a great deal of intestinal fortitude. But
I haven't been able to do it. I just know that I want to.
Yeah.
And Shane couldn't do it. I told Shane, you need to sit on your butt. When you walk out to that little one, you need to sit on your butt. He told me afterward, he said, I couldn't. He could not make my legs go out from under me. He said, I squatted down, but my feet still had to be on the ground in case I had to run. He said, there's no way I could set my bottom on the ground in that, as close as he was to that little one, to put yourself in a submissive pose. But we've talked about it. We think that's what you've got to do. If you want to hit that next step where they will do something more that's not scary, then we have to get out of a scary position that's scary to them, which is make yourself look submissive, I suppose.
Do you think that they can be dangerous?
Oh, sure. You'd be a fool to think that they couldn't be.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that with the body language. When Diane Fossey was studying the lowland gorillas, she had to do the same kind of thing. She put herself in a very submissive position and just kind of cowered, when they came around her, and eventually was able to build a relationship with them. But
so that's definitely higher primate behavior.
Yeah. Well, we know that we've got audio of the little ones coming in and going through everything on our table, examining things, lifting up an ice chest lid and closing it, and then we'd hear feet running off up on the ridge as you could hear our Polaris coming back at 2 a.m. So I started drawing pictures of a man and a Bigfoot in different scenarios, like a man on his haunches reaching out to touch the hand of a Bigfoot, and the Bigfoot reaching out from the brush and touching a hand. And I've drawn these pictures and I keep them laying on our table because I know they're coming in and are looking at our stuff. And I hope that they see these pictures and say, that's us. They're, that's them and that's us. Because I've done that in the past. When I was in the Kiamichis, working the Kiamichis, I put a laminated picture out with my baits of a Bigfoot and a man standing side by side. And the man was always wearing blue fire department, which is easy to identify, a blue fire department sweatshirt with yellow letters that says fire department. So that's the picture of the man that I would have on these laminated cards with it standing beside a Bigfoot. And I would put those out with all of my baits. And I had some things happen there that I hope I can attribute to me spending all that time doing those type of things, where we had a walkie-talkie and another item returned after 4 days of losing them out on a trail somewhere, returned in rock cairns out on the outside of our camp on the trails. And that's clearly an Indian thing, rock cairns with things left in them for us to retrieve. And it was 2 items that we had lost 4 days prior.
Yeah, one was a walkie-talkie, if I remember correctly.
Yes, one was a walkie-talkie, and then the other one was a photograph that we didn't even know we lost a photo. We knew we lost a walkie-talkie, but we didn't know we lost a photograph from the pocket of one of the other older gentlemen who had a pocket full of photographs, and they all looked the same. But he clearly lost one of them on the trail while he was riding. Didn't know he lost one until it was returned in a rock cairn, also. So very interesting. And that's the same area where years before I'd been spent many, many, many hours alone going to that ridge and putting out photos with my baits. So did I establish that kind of relationship prior to that event? I don't know. That's why we're doing it at the 400 in case it worked. That's why I'm putting out these elaborate pictures of Bigfoots and a man trying to touch hands and hoping that they get the message when they look at these. And, you know, who knows? Maybe we'll know in the future. If it happens, we'll be like, hot damn, you guys all should start putting out pictures with your stuff and, you know, of what you want to happen, I guess. I don't know.
We'll put a picture of Robbie out kissing one. So just, I know this one's kind of out of left field, but I know it's something that a lot of people would like to know. As far as origins, what do you think they are? Do you think they're more humanoid? Do you think they're more ape-like?
Well, when I first had my encounter, it took me a long time to get over just the fear of just this big, scary ape-looking thing. It moved like an ape. It looked like an ape. And it scared me like an ape would scare me. But since then, I've had so many things happen. I can almost see their thought processes and, you know, how they train their young. I think their young are disciplined. I think they actually discipline their young in just, I mean, I have to think that there's some kind of human hominid relic alongside of us, very similar, where we all had similar backgrounds 100,000 years ago, and they've evolved alongside of us. I mean, I have to go that route because they're showing me with their thought processes and their behaviors that they're anything but the animal, and that's just the transgression of me moving in that direction from everything that I see up to this point. So, I mean, that's just me. I mean, I think there's some type of human, I don't know. It's hard to say. I just don't see them as being the animal that I thought in the beginning.
Right. I read a book by Ivan T. Sanderson where he was breaking down 4 possible subgroups, and one of them was subhominid, and the other was neoprimate. And I'm kind of torn myself. I don't know whether I believe they're more Neanderthal / Denisovan, or, you know, or more slightly evolved version of Gigantopithecus. From some of the accounts that I've taken from people, like there were some remote accounts I've read from back parts of Canada, where they certainly seemed more primitive, more ape-like. But then some of the ones that I've taken locally, they certainly seem to have more man-like traits. I don't necessarily want to say that they're that close to human because, well, we know from the fact that we've got Neanderthal DNA in our own ancestry, Neanderthal could crossbreed with human. So where they exactly fall on the tree, I don't know, but I think it's somewhere between us and grade 8, but it's got to be pretty close to us.
Yeah, I mean, and just because we know what the bones of a Neanderthal look like, or the stature, or, you know, we don't know how they thought and how they
Right.
how they did they have imaginations? Did they have who knows how incredibly intelligent they might have been? We only know what their bodies look like.
Well, early attempts to show what Neanderthals looked like were made by the old British Museum. The big joke I always make about the British Museum thought they were right about everything, but they tried to make them look as human as possible. But if you haven't had a chance to read the book Them and Us by Danny Vendramini, he had a forensic reconstructionist reconstruct a skull, and the images he came up with are terrifying, and they certainly resemble what people refer to as a modern Sasquatch.
Yes, yeah, I know exactly. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah,
great book.
All I know is the bone structure was so thick, and the reason the bone is thick is because of how much torque, muscle torque, it has to deal with. So for something to have very thick bones means it was incredibly muscular.
Right. Brian Barber says, has Randy ever encountered a dog man while out bigfooting?
I would have to say no. I'm not. No, don't. Never. I've never had anything outside of what I've explained or seen that that goes outside of what a Bigfoot is. I just can't answer it. I don't have any answers for that.
Arkansas Hog Hunter Dan says, you look at every Native American tribe and you'll find accounts of them, and they refer to them as people. Some tribes do, like the Lakota. The Lakota word for Bigfoot is Shiyetanka, which means big elder brother. But then there's some of the Algonquin tribes that just talk about them basically raiding the camps and carrying people off to eat. So different tribes have different interpretations and certainly have different experiences with them. Patrick Noble says, could they be storing those pawpaws in cold water?
Huh, that's interesting. The closest thing I would even think was that they had learned to maybe dig a hole in the side of those ridges and use a rock to cover the hole, kind of like an old cellar. That's the only thing to me that maybe they'd learned that dropping some down in these cooler holes made them last a month longer or something to that effect. I don't know.
I wouldn't think just digging a hole would work, because once you put fruit in soil, that soil will start reclaiming it. It'll start rotting. It'll become seeds for the next generation of crops. So they would have to be storing them in something that, one, is cold, and two, wouldn't allow the seeds to start to germinate. So it's got to be in rock.
Yeah, you just beat me to the punch there, DA. Putting it in the ground is the cue to germinate, make more pawpaws.
Right. Yeah, I mean, who knows?
But it does certainly pose an interesting theory. I mean, if you're finding pawpaw seeds months after there are no more pawpaws around, it begs the question: what are they doing?
Well, I did find an article that I sent to Shane where there was a certain group of Indians that used to take pawpaws and make them into. They would dry them and make them into some type of I'm going to say a bread type substance that you could. And I sent that to Shane only because we had those rock cairn stuff returned in the rock cairns. So
maybe they're making like a primitive form of pemmican.
Well, if I didn't already have it in my head that they're bringing some things that they may have learned with Indian trade, possibly, I can't know why they would put it into a rock gifting spot with rock.
I'm just trying to put an idea on how they might be storing it.
Right.
If they're producing a type of pemmican, if they're taking berries and meats and whatever else, suet, and crushing it together to make pemmican the way the Native Americans did, pemmican will last for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, so it's just fascinating to know that they may be carrying over some things that they've done with Native Americans. I don't know.
Well, there are a lot of tribes that said that they traded with them. The Cherokee said they traded with them.
Translate for the ethnically challenged here. What is pemmican exactly? Like
pemmican is like it's a primitive food storage. Native Americans have been eating it for hundreds of years. They'll take suet, which is basically fat tallow, and they'll mix it with berries and even small pieces of meat. And they will combine all of this and crush it together and then dry it. And it basically, you've got like a fruit, fatty, meaty jerky that is capable of being stored for years.
Oh, cool. I wasn't familiar with it. Thank you for clarifying. I mean, I wasn't the only one who goes, what's that?
And if these creatures know which plants are medicinal, which ones keep mosquitoes at bay, which one keeps ticks at bay, maybe they have a knowledge of certain things like that even are beyond what we know. So we might be surprised if we find out what concoction they are coming up that allows them to save these pawpaws in a certain form that we wouldn't even have thought of.
We were just talking about that on Wednesday night. Some of the researchers I've been in contact throughout the Midwest have noticed that in some of the tree bows and tree breaks that they're finding medicinal plants. They're finding cedar. They're finding spruce. They're finding like milkweed, things that can actually be used in natural remedies. Cedar is a natural bug repellent. You can also take pine needles and brew a tea out of it. Spruce has not only antiseptic, but pain relieving properties if you chew the bark. And some of these places, spruce trees have had the bark stripped 10, 12 feet up.
Oh, well, and cedar is also an antifungal. Things don't tend to rot when they're encased in cedar, which is part of the reason why they like to make cigar boxes out of them.
So if they could unroll the bark from a cedar tree, which is not that difficult if you take your time, and I've seen guys, cut notches and take out large sections of cedar bark. If they were rolling even this primitive, like they were making a primitive pemmican, if they rolled that inside some cedar bark, it might keep for a good long time. And that's something the Native Americans would have known.
Yeah, so much of this conversation is out of my wheelhouse. It's just, I could probably speculate all day long. I could go so many different directions. But man, I've
read a lot on natural remedies and Native American cures. So a lot of these things are just like click in my head that if the Native Americans have known about them for hundreds of years, it only makes sense that Bigfoot would as well.
Right.
Trying to see if I missed any questions. Just here and there says willow bark tea is used for pain relief. Spruce is as well. You can actually take chunks of spruce bark and chew it, and it's like a natural ibuprofen. I mean, cloves. Cloves are great for toothaches. Casey Calloway says you can make pawpaw moonshine. I've never tried pawpaw moonshine. I have had several different varieties of moonshine, but I've never had pawpaw.
I say if it's got a carbohydrate in it, you can ferment it.
I've had persimmons made into moonshine. That was pretty sour, but we referred to that as card table whiskey. One good drink and your legs would just fold right up. Brian Barber says, Randy, what's one spot you've wanted to go but haven't gone to yet?
Harrison Lake in Canada.
That would be a good spot. So how did you get turned on to the Kiamichis? How did you start going down there?
Just
that's a bit of a haul from Kansas City.
In my studies, matter of fact, I think it said at the time I was reading all these reports, it said LaFleur County, Oklahoma, had more sightings on that side of the Mississippi than any other county. So at that point, they had me. That's where I had to go.
Well, it's definitely a hot spot. Don Donaldson had a good question. He said, could they live in caves that are in the middle of areas that they move around? Or so 1 month they go north, another month they go south, but keep the cave in the middle for storage?
Good question. I don't know. I'm not sure that I'm not sure they migrate. I mean, Shane has uncovered a pattern on the 400 where for 2 weeks they would be there, and then a week they would be somewhere else. But that's not a migration. That's just a pattern.
We've kind of put forth the theory that we don't think they migrate. We think they have a range.
I don't see any evidence that they're moving out of an area for any extended that would even signal any type of migration. But I don't know.
A solitary mountain lion has an almost 300-mile range.
Yeah.
I think they just have a big range, because if animals this big stayed in one small area, they'd eat everything there was to eat within a week. They would have to either follow where the game is going or where the plants are blooming. I would say they would have to have a range.
Well, we also don't know. We know they're omnivores. But we don't know how much knowledge they have of all the plants that they can eat. I mean, look how big a bull gets, from eating grass. I mean, a big 2,500-pound muscly bull can get that way from eating grass. One of the most no nutritional grass. So I don't know. I mean, having to follow game, to me, something so intelligent at eating types of vegetation that they can eat, and I don't know. I'm a dummy. I mean, I just try to see what I can see and try to be as logical as I can. And so far that's worked for me, but doesn't mean I've only been right a couple of times out of 100.
Well, if there are a lot of things that just are naturally occurring that they would easily identify as food sources. I mean, certain times you've got tons of mushrooms out there. When the morels are growing, that could easily be a food source. You've got berry patches that grow at different times of the year. You've got walnuts and acorns and persimmons, pawpaws. There's really a bounty out there, especially if you know what you're looking for. There's a lot of stuff that's edible that most people would just walk right by and never know they could even eat it.
Well, what's interesting is a lot of times, if you pick up some details in reports, people will have rabbit hutches and chicken coops. And when I talked to a lady, there was a property I was working by Lake Ulaga for 2 years. And there was a lady on the other side at a place called Talala, a little bitty fly speck of a town called Talala. We talked to this lady, and she had some stuff happening there that just goes to show you. She caught one in her horse barn, elbow deep in the sweet feed. Horse feed.
Absolutely.
So she said it ran and dove through a window that had no glass. It was just a cutout window on the side of the barn. She said it ran and dove through that opening, but she caught it elbow deep in that horse feed barrel where it was eating a few handfuls of the sweet molasses feed. Mm-hmm. And somebody else in that same area, she said, I watched it go to my neighbor's gate to their chicken coop, unlatch the gate, walk to the coop, unlatch the door, go inside, come out with one chicken, close the door, relatch it, latch the gate, and walk into the woods while carrying one chicken. I'm telling you, that only needs to be true one time to show you an established pattern where they have understood that if they can have a circuit where they'll stop at this place and get a few handfuls of the sweet feed. They'll stop at this place, get a few eggs, maybe one chicken. They'll stop by there and get maybe one rabbit out of a rabbit hutch. And they've learned that if they don't take all of the animals, nothing ever changes. It's a non-ending food supply that constantly gets refurbished. And so they can just make these rounds and stay full.
Browsing as they go, as opposed to stopping and eating their fill.
Like a dog or a coyote would go in and just wipe out all the chickens and kill them in a frenzy. But that's the same way
bears do it. Bears browse as they move. You very very seldom see a black bear will sit and just gorge itself.
Incredibly intelligent to know that they'll keep refilling that barrel if you only take a few handfuls at a time.
Roxanne Delgado says, have you had any reports of Bigfoot around Missouri City? It's on the Missouri River just outside of KC.
I'm not sure where Missouri City is, but I've talked to people all the way up to Nebraska. I've talked to a train engineer who saw one crossing the tracks up by Fortescue. I believe it was Fortescue. There's wildlife management areas, along the bluffs. I talked to a lady who saw one in DeKalb, which is just close to the Snow Creek area outside of Kansas City. So yes, there's sightings all along the bluff. I've talked to people. I've interviewed people. So I'm sure there's probably sightings around Missouri City, even though I don't know exactly where that's at. If it's on the river, I'm sure.
Haliwa Wolf says, if they know how to store fruit, wouldn't they know how to store some meat? That might be possible. What about you?
Well, we don't know that they can store the fruit. We're just speculating. So I can't keep jumping to where now they become where they're master, food, can cut up. I can't keep jumping a gap. I don't even know the first one yet. It's a maybe.
Brian Barber says, have you ever been to northern Michigan? He said they do grow them big up here and they definitely eat deer here. I saw a trash panda get snatched within 30 feet of me.
I wish I was up in northern Michigan. I've been to Minnesota, but not Bigfoot research. So there's a lot of places on my bucket list I'd surely like to go. Are you inviting me?
I could put you in contact with a few people up that way that I know that research up in that way. In fact, that's where Doc's at right now. He's in the Upper Peninsula, but he's teaching a medical class. Trying to see if I missed any questions. Sorry about that. Give me just a second. So, I know you and Shane will both be appearing on Blondes and Booze tomorrow night. I want to make sure everybody tunes in to check that out. But what future and I don't want to give away what you guys are going to be talking about tomorrow night, so I'm not even going to ask you about it. But what are some of the future? Well, go ahead.
I'm gonna give a little teaser.
Go for it.
There was a Bigfoot outside of my tent there, and I talked to him. I thought it was somebody messing around my table, getting something that belonged to them. And so I gave them a couple of minutes to get their books and get the hell out of there. I was already laying down. I was quiet in my tent. And when they were moving to different parts of my table that was my personal stuff in my plastic containers, I said something to them. Did not know till the next day that every tent around the perimeter of that field had something happen with footsteps and a sighting. Someone in a car saw one. So that by my tent was also one, but I said something to him through the tent thinking it was a person.
And folks, I'm familiar with some of the details of this story, but if you want to hear the whole version of what happened with this story at this camp out, this was part of the Ozark Mountain Bigfoot conference. There was a camp out that led up to it, end of the night. At the end of it, you're going to have to tune in to Blondes and Booze tomorrow night. I just posted the link for that exact show. Randy and Shane will be both on there, along with the ladies from Blondes and Booze, talking about what happened at that camp out. And I think you guys are going to be pleasantly surprised. I think you're really going to enjoy it. So what future projects do you guys have coming?
Hopefully in 3 weeks, Shane and I are getting back out for a good long stretch at the 400. I've got a new camera that I put together that's been sitting out there, and it doesn't work right. So it needs to be I need to troubleshoot it and figure out what's going on. So we need to get out there so I can get this new camera figured out. But yeah, so that's all we've got planned immediately. And then we will be planning the next filming project. The next filming project, everybody has to fly in. We schedule a time where we're going to all get out there, but that doesn't mean that we're not getting out there on our own because I need to still be out there.
Absolutely. Well, we're coming up on the 2-hour mark, which is usually where we start winding things down. We still got a few minutes. We got to talk about our affiliate programs, but we really want to thank Randy for spending the night with us and hanging out and chatting. And again, if you guys want to hear this story tomorrow night about the camp out, I'm definitely going to be in the chat room listening to that story because I want to hear all the details. I've only heard a little bit, and I'm pretty excited to hear it. Randy, thank you so much for joining us, dude. It's been a hoot. I've really enjoyed hearing your theories and your research, and we've really had a good time. I appreciate you coming in tonight.
Well, thank you, DA. I think highly of you, mainly because you are from Missouri. But now that I see the body of your work, you got credit coming there too. And Robbie, thank you, buddy, for being here with us. And Steve, you too. I appreciate talking with both of you.
Oh, no worries. Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate you being here. Well, folks, we have reached the portion of the show where we're going to start discussing the affiliate programs, and we fortunately have 3 very excellent affiliates. Since Doc isn't here tonight, I'm going to let Doc give you the spiel about Dark Angel Medical in his own words. So here's a little pocket Doc himself to tell you about Dark Angel Medical.
Hey everybody, this is Kerry Pocket Doc Davis from Dark Angel Medical, and you are listening to DA Ex Machina with DA Roberts. You may recognize me or some of my products from Dark Angel Medical in some of the Apex Predator, Lakeview Man, and Wild Hunt books, and you can get those products at www.darkangelmedical.com, along with training classes on how to use those products and save a life. Shoot us an email at info@darkangelmedical.com and be the difference.
And folks, if you go by Dark Angel Medical, make sure you use discount code cryptid25 for 25% off the entire order. And if you mention, the codename Wild Hunt books or any of my books really in general, you can get the Team Odin rocker on the patch, the medical patch. So make sure you swing by Dark Angel Medical. Let them know we sent you and show Doc some love. Robbie, you want to tell us a little bit about Scallywag Tactical? Robbie, we can't hear you, bud. Okay, Robbie will be right back. I'll take this down for a second.
He's about due for his regular scheduled sound glitch.
Yeah, for some reason, this platform does not like Robbie's audio. He should be right back. It'll just take him a minute to pop back in. If I thought I had enough time to talk about
there's one of those rockers y'all were talking about.
That's it.
For the
there he is.
Angel. There's the man.
All right, Robbie.
Can you hear me now?
Man, the myth, the legend. Robbie, Rip, tell us about Scallywag Tactical.
Scallywag Tactical is one of our other affiliates, veteran-owned company. Makes some of the best knives that you can possibly buy. They compete hands down with any of the big box store blades, Kershaw, Gerber, Schrade, Spyderco, any of those knives. I mean, you're gonna pay $200, $300, $400, sometimes even more for some of those knives, and you're not gonna get a better knife than you're gonna get with these. You're not gonna pay nowhere near as much. Plus, all these knives for the most part. There may be one or two that they have to pull in from out of the country, but most all these knives are made in the U.S. from what I've been able to see on the website. Fast shipping, really good customer service. Steve can attest to that. He's told the story several times about stuff that really didn't even have to be done, but they do it because you're not just an order number to them. You're a customer, and like Steve said, they made a customer for life with him just by being that kind of place that takes time to listen to his story, maybe scold him a little bit, but then take care of the problem. And and stuff like that means a lot to us. And if you've read DA's books, you've heard him mention the privateer, you've heard him mention the gunner's mate, you've heard him mention the bounty. Which other ones are in there? The boarding axe.
I think I mentioned that Clark carries a Jolly Roger.
That's right, the Jolly Roger. I was thinking he carried this, but I wasn't sure if it was that or the privateer. But anyway, they're in the books for a reason. We all have some of these knives. Some of us have more than others.
The Wild Hunt team has a black budget, so they get the best toys. So obviously they're buying Scallywag.
Yep,
absolutely.
And there's plenty of y'all in the chat that talk to us all the time about that you got them and you love them. I carry this one from in the shop. On my days when I'm working doing my shop stuff, I carry my sailor assisted folder for my what we call it Sunday go to meeting knife. The razor DA carries every day, which that's a big knife to carry around.
I like the weight of it. I just find it reassuring.
It's definitely wait. I held when before we went to lunch in Gatlinburg that day. He said, "Here, check this out, dude." And I was like, "Oh my god, that thing's big!" But
it's almost as heavy as the freaking gunner's mate. I mean, when it's extended, it's this big. But look how thick that blade is.
Yep,
this thing
I
is
take
heavy.
my mini jack to work every day. I actually had a patient ask me all about it because I had to cut open a box in the patient's room, and instead of reaching for my trauma shears, I took out my mini jack, flipped it open, sliced it, put it back away. Hit guy's like, what kind of knife was that? Like, why? He goes, well, you just went to cardboard like it was nothing. That's an awful small knife. I'm like, oh, here, take a look at it.
Yeah, they do an amazing job. I've had this knife probably close to a year now, and it's still just as sharp as it was when I first got it. And I use it every day. Cut cardboard, open Amazon boxes. Ever since I started doing the laser engraving, I've got foam board that I have to put behind the acrylic signs. This cuts my back pieces out of the foam board to put behind the acrylic signs. Still just razor sharp. They also have a little section on there called blemish blades. If you want to save you a little bit of money, most of the time it's just the box is messed up. So, somebody's knocked a stack of them over and the box is all messed up and they can't sell it as new. So they'll put it on the website for a discounted price, usually a pretty good discounted price. And then once you go pick you some of those out, go to the checkout, hit code DA Roberts 10 and get yourself an extra 10% off of that, of the already lower price that you're going to get on some of the blemish blades. Go check them out. Extremely fast shipping. I ordered this one night after, or while we were on a Saturday night show. I ordered this and the Sailor Assisted folder. By Tuesday, I had them both in my hand. That's pretty good ordering it Saturday night, and by Tuesday, I've got them in my hand.
That's pretty quick shipping.
Mm-hmm. And you can pay on Venmo, which is amazing. You can pay PayPal. Show my age again, Steve. You can pay on Venmo, PayPal, or just put a credit card on the website.
I think they can Google Pay as well.
Yeah, they've just got multiple ways to pay. So you go to a lot of these sites, and it's like you have to pay whatever way they're wanting you to pay. But Craig has just got it set up so nice. It's so user friendly. Website's easy to navigate. It's great. We all love them, and go get yourself a knife. Tell them we sent you, and enjoy.
Absolutely.
Tombstone just said he got a shipment in 4 days to Australia.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And Doc's not here, so I'm gonna put you on the spot, Steve. See if you remember. What's the 3 ways these knives will cut you?
What was it? Long, deep, and continuous?
Good man. He got it.
I'm impressed I did that well with the amount of tequila I've had this evening.
I am, Steve, I am very, very impressed. Wild man, impressed me.
I think the partnership with Scallywag is only going to help our partnership with Dark Angel Medical, because somehow you got to stop the bleeding after you buy your knives.
Exactly.
Yep. Buy a Scallywag tactical knife during Stop the Bleed month, and also buy your Scallywag or your Dark Angel Medical kit to stop your own bleed when you do like me or DA and cause yourself to bleed on camera.
Yeah. Well, on my range bag that I take to the shooting range, I have in my range bag, I've got my Dark Angel dark kit Molly webbed onto the end of my my bag. Then I've got my Jolly Roger in the bag. I may need both at some point.
I've just recently added my Dark Angel dark kit to my camera bag, so when we go out to film, I've always got a Dark Angel kit with me. Our other affiliate, I got a freaking bug flying around me. Our other affiliate is BrockBlades.com. Ken Brock, I haven't seen Ken in the chat tonight.
He wasn't in here tonight. He
hasn't busted my balls once. He must not be on.
Yeah, he sent me a message earlier tonight. Said he had some stuff to do. He wouldn't be on tonight. I'm sorry, I meant to tell you earlier.
Oh, no worries. But Ken's a good friend of the channel. He's been a friend of ours for a good while now, and he's a career law enforcement. And one of the things you'll notice about the 3 affiliates we have is they're either all veteran or first responder owned, because we firmly believe in supporting our veterans and first responders. Brock Blades is a company that makes custom knives, whereas I've said this before, we're Dark Angel Medical. If you buy 2 of the Jolly Rogers, they're identical. They are mass produced. They're beautiful knives. They're high quality knives, but Ken's blades are all unique. They're hand forged in the shop behind his house, and no 2 are identical. You can order blades from BrockBlades.com that are already finished, or you can custom order one to your own specifications. You can choose blade style, handle color. There's a lot of options you can choose. And if you have somebody in your life that is a veteran or current military, is a first responder, is an outdoorsman, hunter, fisherman, anything like that, the gift of a custom-made knife is something that will truly be treasured. And these aren't knives that are meant to just be hung on a wall and looked at because they're pretty. They are handmade. They are works of art, but at the same time, they're deadly efficient and excellent works of art. They can be used every day. I carry this one all the time. This one's called the Skane Dhu, which is modeled off of the old Scottish blade that the Highlanders carry. It means black blade. It was a holdout knife the Highlanders kept in their sock, and I carry this one with me most places I go. But you make sure you go by brockblades.com. You can, like I said, you can either select one that's already built, or you can have one custom made. And at checkout, use the discount code cryptid10 for 10% off your entire order. And if you're ordering a custom, make sure that you mention that you heard about brockblades.com from here on DAX Machina, and he'll make sure that you get that full 10% off your custom order as well. Robbie, you want to tell us a little bit about Lone Wolf Customs?
Yep. Lone Wolf Customs is a business that I've had for a couple years now, but we've since kind of used it as a merchandising platform for Dark Angel Medical, for what's really out there, and for DAX Machina and a few other groups. Krista and Brandy have started talking to us about some stuff. I think Marty's probably thinking about some stuff, just a few other things like that. So we've got laser engraved things that we can do. We can do personalized things like that. Let's see. Can't show one yet because we hadn't got that, but like custom engraving on glass, things like that. Whiskey flasks, tumblers, wooden signs, metal signs, pretty much anything like that we that you want personalized, or that you can just really it's the imagination is the only limitation, it seems like, so far. Going pretty good so far. So if you got anything that you're wanting to order or you're thinking about, especially with the holidays coming up, go ahead and get an order in now. I think Toombs or somebody just put it up in the chat. If you roll it up, it's that's got the email address in it, and send me an email and we'll see if we can get you something gone or put together.
Get yourself something nice.
Real nice, Clark.
It's real nice, Clark.
And you can reach him. There's the email address, rrainsc8@gmail.com.
Hey, Donnie's in the chat. I gotta go watch our show. He aired that tonight. So
what's up, man? Hey, good to see you in there. Seeing quite a few names in there that are still hanging out with us. Mike from Abnormals is here. Hey, Mike. The girls from Blondes and Booze have been here with us tonight. Whole lot of folks in here still. So, folks, we thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. One thing I do want to mention that I always try to mention, especially right here at the end of the show, is how much that we here believe in our first responders and our veterans. Is the 22 a day foundation. We lose 22 veterans a day to suicide, and that is 22 entirely too many. And that also should apply to first responders, because we see a lot of first responders that are having the same PTSD issues, the same darkness. So if you've got a friend or a family member or somebody you care about, reach out to them, let them know you're thinking about them. Your text or your phone call might be what keeps them off the edge. We lose too many people to that, and we want all of the people out there that have served in uniform to know how much they mean to us, how much we appreciate it, and how much of a debt we owe you that we can never repay. Thank you guys, one and all, men and women who have put country and community above your own personal safety to keep us safe and to keep us free. And we thank you guys from the bottom of our hearts. We thank you guys beyond words. We appreciate each and every one of you. And the 22 a day foundation does do a lot of great work with helping with veterans that are dealing with issues like this, as do there are a few other charities like the Valhalla Project, some fantastic charities that are helping a lot of veterans. But you can do more. You can reach out to those people the people that are in your lives that have served. And when I say served, I mean every capacity, from veteran to active military, all the way through somebody who drives an ambulance. They're first responders, and they see things. They see things that sometimes the human mind has trouble comprehending. And sometimes they have trouble facing those demons. And reach out to them. Let them know you're thinking about them. Again, like I said, that text or phone call you give them might be what pulls them back off the edge. And that's what it's all about, to let everybody know they're not in this alone. I know all three of us here have struggled with our own demons and still do. But
there's been a couple of times where that late night text, "You still okay, fucker?" comes in real handy.
And that's something we all do for each other, and I hope that we always do. I know I plan to. But again, keep those folks in your thoughts and prayers. We see too much of it, and I've buried too many friends under flags. It's been kind of a rough week for me for personal reasons. And maybe sees my Facebook post, saw that we lost my aunt last week, and her funeral was Thursday.
I'm sorry, DA, I didn't realize.
No worries, brother. Also had some very rough news. One of my cousins is battling cancer, and it's not going well. So I think got that news this week as well.
Yeah, I also got news today. My cousin got a severe brain bleed Thursday night, and my dad texted me today and said they took him to hospice today. So,
I'm sorry, man.
That's horrible, brother. I'm sorry. We'll be praying for y'all, folks. There's just those. We're all human. We all go through these things. Two of our mods, Toombs and his wife Nikki, they've been dealing with some pretty serious health issues, and I pray for them every day. They're like family to me. We're happy that Miss Lene's healthy. Pat Canada, who's in our chat a lot, she's dealing with some pretty major health issues. She's got a spinal fracture that's going to have surgery on. And of course, William Nighthawk, who's a long time friend of the channel. We pray for him too, because he's still dealing with cancer. So there's a lot of folks out there hurting, and we're all going through something. And it doesn't cost you anything to be kind to one another. And there's way too much ugliness in this world. People that want to come after you for thinking different or acting different. And there's just too much of that crap. I don't want any part of it. I don't want any part of that kind of ugliness. There's been too much ugliness in the world. And I hope that the people that need to hear that know that they're not alone, that we're all here, and we'll all face our demons. But if you need someone to talk to, we're here, and we're happy to help you face those demons, so you don't have to face them alone. One of the traditions we've started here on the show, and I'm really proud that I did, is that we've started ending each show with a toast. And I selected a few words from one of my favorite songs. It's an old Irish song. It's called "The Parting Glass." And if you read the lyrics, it's kind of talking about somebody lifting a glass to his friends at the end of the night because he's leaving the bar. But if you really pay attention to the lyrics, it's more of a metaphor for raising the glass to those who can't lift it anymore at all. For those we've lost along the way, and we've all lost folks. And it's just a reminder again, we're not alone. So, boys, if you'll join me in the toast, I'm going to put that quote up. And it says, "But since it fell unto my lot that I should rise and you should not, I'll gently rise and softly call. Good night, and joy be to you all." Good night, everybody.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you for joining us. Catch us again Wednesdays and Saturdays on DAX Machina. A special thanks to all our channel members and Patreon supporters. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe.